The Last Pilgrim, Ch.1. The Burning Man. Elias was paid to lie for a living, but not just any lie, like lying so someone's feelings doesn't get hurt, or lying so that someone doesn't get in trouble. He lied for the greater good. He lived in the heights. His apartment sat on the 93rd floor of a glass tower in the district, the part of the city where the streets were clean, the air was filtered, and the people who mattered lived and worked. Below, the rest of the city sprawled in gray and rust, but from up here, you couldn't see the decay. You saw only light and order. Elias had earned this view. He was a senior architect at Axiom, the company that shaped what the world saw and believed. Not through force. Force was crude. Axiom worked in stories. A headline here, a trending topic there, a feed carefully tuned to make people feel informed, safe, and certain. It was his job to write those stories. He told himself it was necessary. The world was chaotic, and people needed clarity. They needed someone to sort truth from noise, to frame events in ways that kept the peace. If some voices had to be quieted for the common good, well, that was the price of order. He had been telling himself this for 10 years. He almost believed it. Around his neck, Elias wore a necklace. It was white gold, delicate in appearance, with a millstone ornament hanging from it. The millstone was small, no larger than a coin, and made of the same fine metal. Beautiful in its way. He couldn't remember when it had first appeared. One day it simply was, resting against his chest as if it had always been there. Elias felt heaviest when he did certain work, as if something was weighing him down. When he approved a campaign that painted protesters as mentally ill. When he wrote copy that justified enforcement actions. When he watched footage he knew was edited or staged, then spun it into something palatable for the feeds. In those moments, he felt it in his chest. The chain would tighten around his throat. His breathing would become shallow, labored. He would tell himself, "You did your job. You kept the peace." He felt some relief, and life would go on. But lately, it wasn't settling. Elias had just returned from a long meeting about promoting social cohesion. One world, one voice, one future. He had written most of it himself. He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey and took a slow sip. The burn felt good, familiar. One of the few sensations that still cut through the general numbness of his days. He downed the rest of it as he walked toward his window. He stood there looking down at the city. That's when he saw the crowd gathering in the plaza below. Crowds were unusual in the district. People here moved efficiently, guided by their phones and schedules. But this crowd was different, chaotic, growing. Elias pulled up the city's live feed on his smartphone and zoomed in. A man stood in the center of the plaza. He was around the same age as Elias, with wild gray hair and rough clothes that looked like they came from the outer zones. He stood with his arms raised, shouting, a book in his hands. Torn, missing pages. Elias couldn't hear the words, but he could see the man's face. Urgent, desperate, certain. A small crowd had formed. Some watched with curiosity. Others recorded on their phones. A few looked genuinely afraid. Elias zoomed closer, trying to read the man's lips. He caught fragments. The city of destruction. Judgment is coming. Will be destroyed. His throat tightened. Then the enforcers arrived. 6 of them, in dark uniforms. They moved quickly, efficiently, surrounding the man. The crowd scattered. The enforcers ignored them. Their focus was on the man. He didn't run. He didn't lower his arms. He kept shouting, his voice rising. "This city will be destroyed." The lead enforcer said something, a command, a warning. The man shook his head and kept shouting. The enforcer raised a small black device and pressed it against the man's chest. The man collapsed. Elias exhaled. It was over. A simple extraction. The man would be taken to a center, assessed, helped. That's what the protocols said. That's what Elias had written about. But the enforcers didn't pick him up. They stepped back, and the man began to burn. The flames came from nowhere. One moment, the man was lying on the white stone. The next, fire was crawling across his body, bright, fast, consuming. It spread from his chest outward, turning him into a pillar of flame. The remaining crowd screamed and ran. The enforcers stood in a circle, watching. Elias's glass slipped from his hand and shattered. He stood frozen at the window, unable to look away. The man was still moving. Even as the fire consumed him, his arms were rising, slowly, trembling, reaching upward. And his mouth was still moving, still shouting, or singing. Elias couldn't hear him, but he could see the man's face through the flames. It wasn't twisted in agony. It wasn't fearful. It was peaceful. A deep, impossible peace. The kind that had no business being on the face of a man burning alive. As if he saw something beyond the flames, beyond the smoke, beyond the towers and the sky. The man's eyes, dark and bright, looked upward, past everything, toward something Elias couldn't see. And then, for just a moment, he looked at Elias. 93 floors separated them. Fire and smoke surrounded the man. There was no way he could see Elias's window. But Elias felt it. He felt those eyes lock onto his, felt them see through him, his work, his compromises, his justifications. The man saw all of it. And in that gaze, Elias saw the same peace that filled the man's face. A peace that had nothing to do with circumstances. A peace that existed in spite of the flames. Then the fire rose one final time, and the man was gone. Elias stood at the window, unable to move. Below, workers arrived in yellow vests. They cordoned off the area and began cleaning the plaza. They sprayed something on the scorched stone and scrubbed it with brushes. Within 20 minutes, the stone was white again. A few people crossed it on their way somewhere else. No trace remained. His phone buzzed. A notification from Axiom's feed. Tragic incident in District Plaza. Disturbed individual self-immolates. He opened it. At approximately 6:47 p.m., a male individual suffering from acute psychological distress entered the plaza and set himself on fire before he could be safely detained. Authorities remind citizens that mental health resources are available. If you or someone you know is experiencing distress, please reach out. Elias read it twice. Set himself on fire. He had seen the enforcers surround the man. He had seen the device pressed to his chest. He had seen the man collapse before the flames began. The story said the man set himself on fire. Elias knew it was a lie. His chest tightened again with crushing force. Where is this weight coming from? He sank onto his couch, head in his hands. It's a lie. They killed him. And tomorrow, everyone will believe the story. Because that's how it works. Because that's how I made it work. The thought hit him like a blow. How many times had he done this? How many times had he taken something ugly and made it clean? How many voices had he helped silence? He thought about the campaigns he'd built, the faces he'd helped erase. He thought about the man in the plaza, shouting about judgment, about the destruction of the city. The man's face, the peace, the certainty. That wasn't delusion. That was something real. Something Elias had never seen in the district, never seen in the faces of the successful and the comfortable. And he had spent his career helping to destroy it. Elias couldn't breathe. With great effort, he poured himself another whiskey and drank it in one long sip. He didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flames, the man's face, those eyes. The weight of it. Was it guilt? It was pulling him through the mattress. Around 3 a.m, he gave up. He sat in the dark, watching the city lights. What am I doing? What have I been doing? He thought about his life, his career, his apartment in the sky, all the compromises he'd made to get here. He'd told himself it was worth it, that he was keeping the peace, helping people. But what if he'd been wrong? What if the peace he'd helped build was just a prettier kind of prison? The man in the plaza had called it something. The city of destruction. He went to work the next morning because he didn't know what else to do. Everything looked the same. Clean corridors, soft lighting, pleasant faces. No one mentioned the plaza. He reached his desk and opened his assignments. 3 tasks waited. The first was a follow-up on campaign. The second was a feature. The third was a brief about yesterday's incident. Elias stared at it. The brief was short. It outlined the official story and provided talking points. His job was to expand it into something reassuring for the evening feed. He'd done this 100 times. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He thought about the man's eyes. He thought about the peace. He thought about the lie. And for the first time in 10 years, Elias couldn't write the story. He sat at his desk, staring at the blank screen. Just write it, he told himself. It's just words. You've done this before. But his hands wouldn't move. Every time he tried, he saw the flames, the arms reaching upward, the peace in those dying eyes. He couldn't do it. He couldn't take that moment and turn it into another lie. Around midday, his supervisor stopped by. "How's the plaza piece coming?" "It's coming," he said. "I just need more time." She nodded, but something flickered behind her eyes. "Evening feed goes live in 6 hours. You'll have it." She moved on. Elias turned back to his screen. The cursor blinked at him. He thought about what would happen if he refused. If he stood up and walked out and never came back. The thought was terrifying. It was also the first honest thought he'd had in years. He left early, claiming a headache. He walked home through the clean streets. People smiled. The air was perfect. Everything was fine. He walked hunched forward, one hand pressed to his chest, trying to ease the pressure, but he couldn't. He kept seeing the man's face, kept hearing those fragments. The city of destruction. Judgment is coming. Death. He reached his building and took the elevator up. When the doors opened, he stopped. There was something on his doorstep. A small black flash drive. Unmarked. Elias looked down the hallway. Empty. He bent down and picked it up. "Don't open it," a voice warned. "You don't know what's on it. It could destroy everything you've built." He thought about the man in the plaza. He thought about the lie. He thought about the necklace crushing his throat. He went inside and plugged the flash drive into his computer. The screen flickered. Text appeared. White on black. "You saw what happened in the plaza." Elias's breath caught. "You saw the enforcers. You saw the device. You saw him fall before the flames." You know the story is a lie. You've been telling lies for them for years. You've felt the weight, haven't you? The chain around your neck, the stone pressing into your chest. That weight has a name. It's called guilt. The city you live in is called the city of destruction. It is beautiful. It is comfortable. It is doomed. Judgment is coming, not someday, soon. The man you saw knew this. He came to warn you. They killed him for it. But his message didn't die. There is a way out, a narrow way, a hard way. It will cost you everything, but it is the only way to be free of the weight, the only way to escape the destruction, the only way to find the King. Below the text, a name appeared, Christian, and below that, a question. Will you follow? Elias sat in silence. The weight comes from his necklace? He asks himself. Outside, the city pulsed with light. A world that had promised him everything. A world that had just burned a man alive and called it mercy. He thought about his career, his reputation, everything he'd worked for. He thought about the necklace, growing heavier every day. He thought about the man's eyes, the peace, the certainty. And for the first time in his life, Elias felt the full weight of a question he couldn't ignore. What if everything I've built my life on is a lie? He didn't have an answer, but deep in his chest, beneath the fear and doubt, something stirred. The necklace was still there, getting heavier, getting harder to manage. But now he knew what it was, and he knew he couldn't carry it alone. The question glowed on the screen. Will you follow? Elias closed his eyes. The millstone pressed down, and somewhere far below, in the parts of the city that never made the feeds, a clock moved 1 second closer to midnight.